Millie Evans clutched the letter to her chest as the stagecoach rattled beneath her, tears stinging her eyes while the sprawling Texas landscape rolled past the dusty window. The letter from her cousin contained the final blow. Her husband of 6 years had made it official, divorcing her on the grounds of barrenness, a failure that had haunted her throughout their marriage. Boston society had no place for a woman who couldn't give a man heirs, and at 26, Millie was heading to the only place that would take her in: Sweetwater, Texas. The year was 1875, and the frontier town of Sweetwater represented her last hope, a final chance to rebuild her life far from the whispers and pitying glances of Boston's elite. Her cousin Beatrice had written that the town needed a schoolteacher, and Millie's education might finally serve a purpose beyond attracting a suitable husband. Sweetwater Station coming up, the driver called from above, his voice barely audible over the pounding of hooves and creaking of wheels. Millie straightened her travel-worn dress and tucked a stray brown curl back beneath her bonnet. She'd left behind everything: her family's connections, her social standing, and the hollow shell of a marriage that had slowly poisoned her spirit. All she had now was a small trunk containing her possessions and the teaching certificate she'd earned before marrying Harold. The stagecoach lurched to a stop before a collection of buildings that made up the main street of Sweetwater. The small frontier town was dusty and weathered, nothing like the brick-lined streets and elegant brownstones of Boston. A handful of horses stood hitched outside the establishments, and men in wide-brimmed hats moved with purpose along the boardwalks. "Need help with that trunk, madam?" asked the driver as Millie descended shakily from the coach. "Yes, please," she replied, glancing around the unfamiliar surroundings. "I'm to meet my cousin Beatrice Wheeler at the general store." The driver nodded and hauled down her trunk. "That'd be just yonder, the place with the blue door." Millie walked tentatively toward the general store, painfully aware of the curious glances from townsfolk. A woman traveling alone was unusual enough, but she knew her Eastern clothing marked her as an outsider. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside. "Millie." "Oh, thank heavens you've arrived safely." Beatrice rushed forward, embracing her warmly. 10 years Millie's senior, Beatrice had left Boston for the frontier after her husband died in a factory accident, finding purpose as the wife of the general store owner. "The journey was long, but I'm here now," Millie said, returning the embrace. "Let me look at you," Beatrice said, stepping back. "You're thin as a rail, Thomas," she called to her husband. "Come meet my cousin Millicent Evans, our new schoolteacher." Thomas Wheeler, a balding man with kind eyes, wiped his hands on his apron before extending one to Millie. "Welcome to Sweetwater, Miss Evans. We've been eager for someone to take charge of the schoolhouse." "Thank you for the opportunity," Millie replied, summoning a smile despite her exhaustion. "The town council approved your appointment based on Beatrice's recommendation," Thomas explained. "School term starts in 3 weeks, which should give you time to settle in." "I've had a room prepared for you above the store," Beatrice added. "It's modest but clean and private." "That's very kind," Millie said, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in months. Perhaps here, far from the judging eyes of Boston society, she could find purpose beyond her failure as a wife. Later that evening, after a simple but hearty meal, Beatrice broached the subject Millie had been dreading. "I told folks you're a widow," Beatrice said quietly as they washed dishes together. "I hope you don't mind. It's easier that way." Millie's hands stilled in the soapy water. "I suppose I am a kind of widow. The life I knew is certainly dead." "Harold was a fool," Beatrice said firmly. "What happened wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it? 6 years, Beatrice. 6 years of doctors and tonics and prayers. 6 years of watching other women cradle their babies while my arms remained empty." Millie's voice cracked. "They called me barren, worthless. Even my own mother suggested Harold would be justified in seeking annulment." Beatrice dried her hands and took Millie's shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not defined by your ability to bear children. Here, you can be Miss Evans, the schoolteacher. You can make a difference in young lives. That's worth something." Millie nodded, not entirely convinced but grateful for the compassion. "I'll try to make a new beginning." "That's the spirit," Beatrice smiled. Now get some rest. Tomorrow I'll introduce you around town. As promised, Beatrice took Millie on a tour of Sweetwater the next morning. The town was larger than Millie's first impression suggested, with a church, a small bank, several saloons, a barber shop, a doctor's office, and the schoolhouse at the edge of town. It's not much to look at, Beatrice admitted as they approached the weathered one-room building. But the town council approved funds for new books and supplies before your arrival. Millie ran her hand along one of the desks, imagining children filling the room. How many students will there be? About 20, ranging from 6 to 15. Most are from ranching families. The older ones only attend when ranch work allows. Beatrice hesitated. Some of the ranch hands' children haven't had much schooling. You'll need patience. I understand, Millie said, already envisioning how she would arrange the classroom. As they walked back through town, Beatrice pointed out the doctor's house. That's where Dr. Phillips lives. He's away visiting patients at the Wilson Ranch, but he's on the town council and very supportive of education. Their next stop was the sheriff's office, where Sheriff Mason Caldwell greeted them with a tip of his hat. So you're our new schoolmarm, he said, assessing Millie with shrewd eyes. Don't let the youngsters run roughshod over you, especially the Callahan boys. They're spirited, to put it kindly. I'll keep that in mind, Millie replied, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. The tour concluded at the land office, where Beatrice introduced Millie to Mr. Hawkins, a thin man with spectacles who doubled as the town's lawyer. Miss Evans, welcome, he said, shaking her hand. We're fortunate to have someone of your education join our community. I'm also the chairman of the school board, so we'll be working together. By midweek, Millie had met most of Sweetwater's prominent citizens and begun preparing the schoolhouse for the coming term. She scrubbed desks, organized books, and wrote out lesson plans, finding comfort in the familiar tasks. Each evening, she helped Beatrice and Thomas in the store, gradually learning the rhythms of frontier life. On Friday morning, Millie was sweeping the schoolhouse porch when the thunder of hooves drew her attention. A group of riders approached from the north, dust billowing behind them. She shaded her eyes against the sun, watching as they rode toward town. That'll be the O'Malley outfit, called Mrs. Peterson, who was hanging laundry in the yard across the way. They come to town first Friday of every month for supplies. Millie watched with interest as 5 riders dismounted at the hitching posts in front of the general store. 4 were clearly ranch hands dressed in practical, dust-covered clothes. But it was the 5th man who caught her eye. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with an easy confidence as he gave instructions to the others. Who is that? Millie asked, unable to look away. That's Flynn O'Malley himself, Mrs. Peterson replied with a knowing smile. Owns the biggest spread north of town, 32 years old and not married, which makes him the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties. Millie felt a blush creep up her cheeks at Mrs. Peterson's insinuation. I'm only curious about the townspeople, as I'll be teaching their children. Well, he's got no children, but O'Malley pays school taxes for his ranch hands' little ones, Mrs. Peterson said. He's good that way, fair employer, they say. Millie resumed her sweeping, trying to appear uninterested, but she couldn't help stealing glances toward the store. After a few minutes, she decided she needed supplies from Beatrice and made her way down the dusty street. The bell jingled as she entered the general store, which was now crowded with the ranch hands selecting provisions. Beatrice was busy at the counter, measuring coffee beans while Thomas tallied figures in a ledger. And there, examining a shelf of tools, stood Flynn O'Malley. Up close, he was even more imposing, at least 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders beneath a blue cotton shirt. His skin was tanned from long days under the Texas sun, and his dark hair curled slightly where it met his collar. When he turned, Millie was startled by the intensity of his blue eyes. You must be the new schoolteacher, he said, his voice a pleasant baritone. Word travels fast in these parts. Yes, I'm Millicent Evans, she stammered, extending her hand automatically as she would in Boston society. Instead of shaking it, O'Malley tipped his hat. Flynn O'Malley, madam. I run the Double Bar Ranch north of town. His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. Boston, is it? That's quite a journey. How did you know? Millie asked, surprised. A slight smile curved his lips. Your accent and those shoes weren't made for Texas dirt. Millie glanced down at her buttoned boots, now coated with a fine layer of dust despite her best efforts. I suppose I have much to learn about frontier life. We all start somewhere, he replied. My father came from Ireland with nothing but determination. Built the double bar from a one-room cabin and 3 head of cattle. That's impressive, Millie said sincerely. The school's important to my ranch hands' families, O'Malley continued. We've got 4 children who will be attending. The oldest, James, is good with figures but needs work on his letters. I'll keep that in mind, Millie promised, touched by his concern for his employees' children. Beatrice called from the counter. Flynn, your order's ready for tallying. Duty calls, O'Malley said with a nod. Welcome to Sweetwater, Miss Evans. I expect we'll be seeing more of each other. As he walked away, Millie felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest. She quickly dismissed it, reminding herself that she hadn't come to Texas to find another husband. She'd come to build a new life, one where her worth wasn't measured by her ability to bear children. Nevertheless, as she gathered her supplies and headed back to the schoolhouse, she found herself thinking about Flynn O'Malley's blue eyes and the way they'd looked at her not with pity or disappointment, but with genuine interest. The first day of school arrived with clear skies and a cool morning breeze that promised heat by midday. Millie stood at the schoolhouse door, ringing the bell to signal the start of term. She'd spent hours preparing her appearance, wanting to strike the right balance between authority and approachability. Her dark blue dress was modest but well-tailored, her brown hair neatly pinned beneath a small cap. One by one, children began arriving, some on foot from town, others on horseback or in wagons from outlying farms and ranches. They eyed her with varying degrees of curiosity, shyness, and in a few cases, outright skepticism. Good morning, Millie greeted each child, making mental notes of names and ages as they filed into the schoolroom. By 8 o'clock, 19 students had arrived, ranging from 6-year-old Sarah Wilson, who clutched a slate and primer with determination, to 15-year-old Robert Callahan, whose slouched posture and wary eyes suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Millie cleared her throat and the chatter subsided. Good morning, students. I am Miss Evans, your new teacher. She wrote her name on the blackboard in neat script. I've come all the way from Boston to teach in Sweetwater because I believe education is the greatest gift we can receive. A small hand shot up. It belonged to a freckle-faced boy of about 8. Yes, Millie acknowledged him. Is it true you're a widow, madam? He asked bluntly. The question caught her off guard. Whispers rippled through the classroom as the children leaned forward, eager for her answer. Tommy Wheeler, admonished an older girl who Millie recognized as Beatrice's daughter, Louise. That's not polite to ask, Millie took a steadying breath. It's all right, Louise. Yes, Tommy, I am a widow. But I've come to Sweetwater for a new beginning, just as many of your families did when they settled here. Now, shall we begin with roll call? The morning proceeded with assessments of each student's abilities. As Flynn O'Malley had mentioned, James Parker, the son of his foreman, was indeed skilled with numbers but struggled with reading. The Callahan brothers were restless but not deliberately disruptive, and little Sarah Wilson proved to be uncommonly bright for her age. By noon, when Millie rang the bell for the lunch break, she felt cautiously optimistic. The children spilled outside to eat their packed meals in the schoolyard while Millie remained at her desk, reviewing her afternoon plans and nibbling on the sandwich Beatrice had prepared for her. A knock at the open door made her look up. Flynn O'Malley stood in the doorway, hat in hand. Mr. O'Malley, she said, rising from her seat, this is unexpected. I was in town on business, he explained, stepping inside. Thought I'd see how the first day was going. My hands are anxious about their children's schooling. The children are doing well, Millie assured him. James has a quick mind for arithmetic, just as you said. With some extra attention to his reading, he'll make excellent progress. O'Malley nodded, his expression thoughtful as he surveyed the classroom. It's changed since I sat in one of these desks. Old Mr. Fredericks was strict, believed in the rod more than reason. You attended school here? Millie asked, surprised, until I was 12. Then my father needed me full-time at the ranch. His gaze settled on the bookshelf. You've got some new titles. Yes, the town council was generous with the book allowance. Millie hesitated. Did you come all this way just to check on the school? O'Malley's eyes met hers, and for a moment he seemed almost uncertain. Not entirely. The church social is this Saturday evening. I wondered if you might consider attending. Millie felt warmth creep up her neck. The social, it's a welcome tradition for new folks in town, he explained. Nothing formal, just food and conversation, maybe some music if Reverend Parker brings his fiddle. I see, Millie said, trying to gauge his intentions. Will you be attending as well? A slight smile curved his lips. I had planned to, yes. Before Millie could respond, the door burst open and Tommy Wheeler rushed in. Miss Evans, Robert Callahan's climbing the big oak tree and says he won't come down till school's out, Millie sighed. Please excuse me, Mr. O'Malley, duty calls. Of course, he replied, replacing his hat. About the social, I'll be there, Millie said, surprising herself with her quick decision. Thank you for the invitation. As she hurried out to deal with Robert Callahan's arboreal rebellion, Millie couldn't help wondering if Flynn O'Malley's interest was merely neighborly courtesy or something more. Either way, she reminded herself, romance wasn't part of her plan for Sweetwater. The church social on Saturday evening proved to be the liveliest event Millie had attended since arriving in Texas. The churchyard was strung with lanterns, tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes, and true to O'Malley's prediction, Reverend Parker had brought his fiddle. The music was lively, the conversation friendly, and for the first time since leaving Boston, Millie felt a sense of belonging. You look lovely tonight, Beatrice commented as they helped arrange desserts on a table. That green dress brings out your eyes. It's just something I had packed away, Millie demurred, though she'd spent considerable time deciding what to wear. The sage green dress was one of her finest, with a modest bustle and lace at the collar and cuffs. Well, it's caught someone's attention, Beatrice said with a meaningful glance toward the churchyard gate where Flynn O'Malley had just arrived. He wore a clean white shirt, dark vest, and his usual denim pants, though these looked newer than his work clothes. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance. He's just being neighborly, Millie protested, though her heart quickened as O'Malley scanned the crowd, his gaze eventually finding her. He nodded in greeting. Flynn O'Malley doesn't attend every social, Beatrice said knowingly. In fact, I can't remember the last time he came to one. Before Millie could respond, Sheriff Caldwell approached their table. Evening, ladies. Miss Evans, I hear good things about your first week of teaching. Even got Robert Callahan to read aloud from what my deputy's boy tells me. Robert has potential, Millie said. He just needed the right motivation. And what motivation works on a stubborn 15-year-old? The sheriff asked curiously. I offered him a choice: read a passage from our history book to the class or write a 3-page essay on the importance of following school rules. Millie smiled. He chose reading, the sheriff laughed. Well played, Miss Evans. As the evening progressed, Millie circulated among the townspeople, gradually putting names to faces and learning more about Sweetwater's history. She was discussing the possibility of a school library with Mr. Hawkins when Flynn O'Malley finally approached. Miss Evans, he said with a nod. You seem to be settling in well. Sweetwater has been most welcoming, she replied, noting how the lamplight brought out gold flecks in his blue eyes. Would you care for some punch? O'Malley asked, gesturing toward the refreshment table. Thank you, that would be lovely. As they walked together, Millie was acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople. Clearly, O'Malley's attention was considered significant. How was your first week of teaching? He asked, handing her a cup of punch. Challenging but rewarding, Millie admitted. The children have different levels of education, which makes group instruction difficult. You'll find a way, O'Malley said with confidence. You strike me as a determined woman. I am, Millie agreed, though some might call it stubbornness. A smile tugged at his lips, a quality I admire. It takes stubbornness to build something lasting out here, Their conversation flowed easily as they discussed books they'd read, the changes coming to Texas with the railroads, and the challenges of ranch life. O'Malley was more educated than Millie had expected, explaining that his Irish father had valued learning despite his own limited schooling. He couldn't write his name when he landed in New York, O'Malley said, made up his mind his son would do better, hired tutors when he could afford them. He sounds like a remarkable man. He was, O'Malley agreed, a shadow crossing his face. Lost him 3 years ago, pneumonia. I'm sorry, Millie said softly. It's difficult to lose a parent. Your parents are both gone, he asked. My father, yes. My mother remains in Boston. Millie hesitated. We're not close. O'Malley seemed about to inquire further when Reverend Parker struck up a lively tune and several couples moved to the cleared area for dancing. Would you care to dance, Miss Evans? O'Malley asked, offering his hand. Millie hesitated only briefly before accepting. I should warn you, the dances I learned in Boston may differ from Texas customs. Just follow my lead, he said with a reassuring smile. As it turned out, the dance was a simple reel that Millie recognized from her youth. O'Malley proved to be light on his feet despite his imposing size, and Millie found herself laughing as they whirled through the steps. When the music ended, they were both slightly breathless. You dance well for a rancher, Millie remarked. And you follow well for a Boston lady, he countered, his eyes warm. The evening continued pleasantly, and when O'Malley offered to walk Millie back to the general store, she accepted without hesitation. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the Texas sky in a way they never appeared in Boston. I never tire of this view, O'Malley said, following her gaze upward. Sometimes I ride out alone at night just to look at the stars. It's breathtaking, Millie agreed. In Boston, the buildings and gas lamps obscure most of the stars. They reached the general store too quickly for Millie's liking. On the porch, she turned to face him. Thank you for the escort, Mr. O'Malley. Flynn, please, he said. Mr. O'Malley was my father. Flynn, she repeated, the name feeling intimate on her lips. And I'm Millie to my friends. Are we friends, Millie? He asked softly. I'd like us to be, she answered honestly. He studied her face in the moonlight. I'd like to call on you properly if you're amenable. Millie's heart skipped. I'm not sure that's wise, she said, though part of her wanted nothing more. Because you're still mourning your husband, he asked gently. The reminder of her fabricated widowhood stung. Partly, she said, unable to meet his eyes. And partly because I came to Sweetwater to be a teacher, not to, that is, I'm not looking for. I understand, Flynn said, though disappointment flickered across his face. But friendship is still on offer. Millie smiled, relieved. Friendship I can accept. Then good night, friend Millie, he said, tipping his hat before turning to leave. Millie watched him walk away, conflicted emotions warring within her. Flynn O'Malley intrigued her more than any man she'd met since coming to Texas, but her secret hung between them like a shadow. How could she contemplate anything beyond friendship when their acquaintance was founded on a lie? As autumn deepened, Millie settled into the rhythms of Sweetwater. Her days were filled with teaching, her evenings often spent helping in the store or preparing lessons. Despite her insistence on friendship only, Flynn O'Malley became a regular visitor to town, finding reasons to stop by the schoolhouse or the general store. Sometimes he brought books for the school volumes of poetry or history that he claimed were gathering dust at the ranch. Other times he arrived with practical gifts, a repaired desk, new chalk, or once, a magnificent wall map of the United States that must have cost a small fortune. The children should know what lies beyond Texas, he said when Millie protested that it was too extravagant. The children adored him, especially when he told stories of cattle drives or demonstrated rope tricks during lunch breaks. Millie found herself looking forward to his visits, even as she maintained a careful distance. One crisp October afternoon, as Millie was dismissing her students, she noticed a commotion in the street. A wagon had overturned, blocking the road, and a crowd was gathering. Among the onlookers was Alina Blackwood, the banker's wife, who had made no secret of her disapproval of Millie. "What happened?" Millie asked Louise Wheeler as the girl gathered her books. "Looks like Mr. Peterson's wagon axle broke," Louise replied. That's the second time this month. Pa says he needs a new wagon, but Mr. Peterson's too stubborn to spend the money. Millie watched as several men, including Sheriff Caldwell, tried to right the wagon, which was loaded with lumber. The weight was proving challenging. "Miss Evans," a small voice drew her attention. James Parker, Flynn's foreman's son, stood beside her desk, clutching a slate. "I finished those extra sums you assigned." "Well done, James," Millie said, examining his work. "You've made excellent progress. Your father will be proud." "Pa says Mr. O'Malley's been helping him with figuring too," James said eagerly. "They're working on expanding the north pasture, and Pa needs to calculate fencing." "Is that so?" Millie smiled at the thought of Flynn taking time to help his employee improve his arithmetic. It matched what she was learning about the rancher beneath his reserved exterior was a genuinely compassionate man. A cheer from outside drew their attention. Flynn O'Malley had arrived on horseback and was now helping the men with the wagon. His strength was evident as he positioned himself at the heaviest corner, and with a coordinated effort, they managed to right the vehicle. "Mr. O'Malley's strong as an ox," James said admiringly. "Pa says there's nothing he can't fix if he sets his mind to it." "Your father may be right," Millie agreed, watching as Flynn secured the scattered lumber back onto the wagon. When the excitement was over and James had departed, Millie remained at the schoolhouse, organizing books for the next day's lessons. She was startled by a knock at the door. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Flynn said, standing in the doorway. His shirt was dusty from the wagon incident, and a smudge of dirt marked his cheekbone. "Not at all," Millie replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest at his unexpected appearance. "That was impressive work with Mr. Peterson's wagon," Flynn shrugged, "just lending a hand." He stepped inside, removing his hat. "Actually, I came with a purpose. The ranch is hosting a harvest gathering next Saturday. Nothing fancy, just a barbecue and some music for the hands and their families. I'd be honored if you'd attend." "At your ranch?" Millie asked, surprised. She'd never ventured beyond the immediate vicinity of Sweetwater. "It's about an hour's ride," Flynn explained. "I'd send a wagon for you, of course. Beatrice and Thomas are invited too, along with several other families from town." Millie hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. "It sounds lovely, but before you refuse," Flynn interrupted gently, "consider it an educational opportunity. Several of your students live at the ranch. Wouldn't it be valuable to see their home environment?" Millie couldn't help but smile at his clever approach. "Using my dedication to teaching against me, Mr. O'Malley," Flynn, he corrected, returning her smile. "And I'd use any fair argument to persuade you." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Millie forgot all the reasons why keeping her distance was prudent. "Very well," she heard herself say. "For the children's educational benefit, of course." "Of course," Flynn agreed, though his eyes suggested he understood her real motivation as well as she did herself. "The wagon will collect you at 9 on Saturday morning." After he left, Millie sat at her desk, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake. Her attraction to Flynn O'Malley was growing stronger by the day, despite her best efforts to guard her heart. Sooner or later, if their friendship continued to deepen, she would have to tell him the truth about her past. And when that happened, she feared he would look at her the way Harold had in the end, with disappointment and rejection. Saturday dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for an outdoor gathering. Millie dressed with care in a rust-colored skirt and cream blouse, practical enough for a ranch visit but flattering nonetheless. She plaited her brown hair and coiled it at the nape of her neck, adding a simple cameo brooch her grandmother's at her collar. The wagon arrived precisely at 9, driven by Hank Parker, Flynn's foreman and James's father. Beatrice and Thomas were already seated in the back, along with the Caldwell family and Reverend Parker and his wife. "Good morning, Miss Evans," Hank greeted her. "The boss said to make sure you had a comfortable seat." "Thank you, Mr. Parker," Millie replied, allowing him to help her up to the bench seat beside him. "James has been making excellent progress with his reading." "That's good to hear," Hank said proudly as he flicked the reins to start the horses. "He reads to his little sister every night now. Never saw him take to books before you came." The journey to the Double Bar Ranch took them north through rolling hills covered in autumn dry grass and scattered oak trees. As they crested a rise, Millie got her first view of Flynn O'Malley's home. The ranch spread across a verdant valley where a creek provided water for cattle and crops alike. The main house was larger than Millie had expected, a two-story structure of stone and wood with a wide porch wrapping around three sides. Several smaller cabins dotted the property, along with a bunkhouse, barn, and corrals. "It's beautiful," Millie said, genuinely impressed. "O'Malley's father built the original cabin," Hank explained, pointing to a small structure near the creek that was now used as a smokehouse. "Flynn added the main house 7 years ago after they had a good season. Does most of the work himself with help from the hands." As they approached, Millie saw activity throughout the ranch. Men were preparing a barbecue pit, women arranged tables under the trees, and children ran freely, excited by the festivities. Flynn emerged from the main house as the wagon pulled up, striding toward them with a warm smile. "Welcome to the Double Bar," he said, helping Millie down from the wagon. "I'm glad you could come." "Thank you for the invitation," Millie replied, suddenly shy under his appreciative gaze. "Let me show you around," Flynn offered, extending his arm. "The food won't be ready for an hour yet." Millie placed her hand on his arm, aware of Beatrice's knowing smile as Flynn led her away from the wagon. They walked through the bustling ranch yard, Flynn greeting his employees by name and introducing Millie to those she hadn't yet met. "This is my pride," Flynn said as they approached a fenced garden behind the main house. Inside, neat rows of vegetables grew alongside fruit trees and berry bushes. "My mother started it, and I've kept it going. We grow enough to feed the ranch year-round with proper canning and storage." "I'm impressed," Millie said, noting the careful irrigation system that channeled water from the creek. "I wouldn't have expected a cattle rancher to be so devoted to gardening. My mother believed in self-sufficiency," Flynn explained, "and there's satisfaction in growing things." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Creating life has its own reward." Something in his tone made Millie glance at him sharply. There was a vulnerability in his expression she hadn't seen before. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," she said gently. "She was," Flynn agreed. "Died when I was 16, childbirth." His jaw tightened. "The baby my sister didn't survive either." "I'm so sorry," Millie said, her heart aching for the young man he'd been, losing both mother and sister in one tragic day. "It was a long time ago," Flynn said, though his eyes suggested the wound remained. "Shall we continue the tour? I'd like to show you the house." The main house was as impressive inside as out, with polished wooden floors, sturdy furniture, and unexpected touches of refinement, books lining shelves in the study, a piano in the parlor, and delicate curtains at the windows. "My mother's," Flynn explained when he caught Millie examining the piano. "Do you play?" "A little," Millie admitted, "though I haven't practiced in years." "Perhaps you'll favor us with a tune later," he suggested. "It rarely gets played these days." "Perhaps," Millie said noncommittally, though the idea of filling this house with music appealed to her. As they completed the tour and rejoined the gathering outside, Millie found herself imagining what life might be like in such a home, warm, purposeful, and far removed from the artificial constraints of Boston society. It was a dangerous line of thought, she knew, but one she couldn't entirely suppress. The afternoon passed pleasantly with good food, conversation, and eventually music when Reverend Parker produced his fiddle and one of the ranch hands revealed a talent for the harmonica. Children played games in the yard while adults talked and laughed. The barriers between town and ranch folk temporarily dissolved in shared enjoyment. As twilight approached, Flynn found Millie sitting on a bench near the garden, watching the celebration. "You've been quiet," he observed, settling beside her. "Not enjoying yourself, on the contrary," Millie assured him. "It's been wonderful. I was just thinking how different this is from social gatherings in Boston." "Less formal, I imagine," Flynn said. "Less pretense," Millie corrected. "In Boston, every social event is a performance. Here, people simply are." Flynn nodded. One of the things I love about this life, hard work and honesty are what matter, not fancy manners or family connections. It's refreshing, Millie agreed. Though I admit some Boston habits are hard to break. Such as, Millie smiled ruefully. I still find myself mentally cataloging the proper fork to use at dinner, even when eating barbecue with my fingers. Flynn laughed, a rich sound that warmed Millie more than the evening bonfire. I'd like to see Boston someday, he said, though I suspect I'd be as out of place there as a bull in a china shop. I'd guide you through the mysteries of urban etiquette, Millie offered, then blushed at the implication that they might someday visit Boston together. Flynn's expression grew serious. Millie, I've been meaning to ask, but whatever question he intended was interrupted by a commotion from the direction of the corrals. A man was shouting and several others ran toward the sound. Stay here, Flynn said, rising quickly. Something's wrong. Millie watched anxiously as Flynn jogged toward the disturbance where a crowd had gathered. After several tense minutes, Flynn emerged from the group, supporting a limping ranch hand. What happened? Millie asked when they drew near. Lewis caught his leg between a horse and the corral fence, Flynn explained. Nothing broken, but he'll have a nasty bruise. I told the boss I'm fine, Lewis protested, though his grimace belied his words. You'll sit and rest, Flynn said firmly. Millie, would you mind staying with him while I fetch Dr. Phillips to take a look? Of course, Millie agreed, helping Lewis to the bench. As the evening continued, the incident with Lewis proved to be minor, but it changed the course of the gathering. Many guests departed as darkness fell, and by the time the wagon was ready to return to Sweetwater, only a handful remained. You should stay the night, Flynn suggested to Beatrice and Thomas as they prepared to leave. It's getting late for the journey. We need to open the store early tomorrow, Thomas declined, but thank you for the offer. Flynn turned to Millie. The offer extends to you as well. Mrs. Parker can provide a room in their cabin. The wagon can return you to town in the morning. Millie hesitated, torn between propriety and the desire to extend her time at the ranch. I should return with the others, she finally decided. I have lessons to prepare for Monday. Though disappointment flickered in Flynn's eyes, he nodded. Another time, perhaps. As the wagon pulled away, Millie looked back at Flynn standing in the yard, his tall figure illuminated by the dying bonfire. He raised a hand in farewell, and she returned the gesture, already looking forward to their next meeting. The wagon had barely cleared the ranch boundaries when Beatrice leaned forward from her seat behind Millie. He's quite taken with you, she whispered. We're friends, Millie insisted, grateful for the darkness that hid her blush. If you say so, Beatrice replied, unconvinced. But I've known Flynn O'Malley for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Millie remained silent, her thoughts in turmoil. Could she allow herself to care for Flynn, knowing the truth that lay between them? And if she did, how long could she maintain the fiction of her widowhood before the lie poisoned whatever might grow between them? As the wagon rumbled through the Texas night, Millie made a decision. If Flynn's interest continued, she would tell him the truth about Harold, about the divorce, about her barrenness. Better to face rejection now than to build a deeper connection on falsehood. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. 3 days after the harvest gathering, Flynn appeared at the schoolhouse as Millie was dismissing her students for the day. Mr. O'Malley, cried James Parker with delight. Did you bring Copper? He's hitched outside, Flynn confirmed, referring to his chestnut gelding. But I came to speak with Miss Evans, not to disrupt your departure. The children filed out, some lingering to admire Flynn's horse before heading home. When the last student had gone, Flynn stepped inside the schoolhouse, removing his hat. This is a pleasant surprise, Millie said, gathering papers from her desk. I hope so, Flynn replied. I've come with a purpose, and I'd appreciate a few minutes of your time. Something in his tone made Millie look up sharply. Is everything all right? Yes, he assured her. Nothing's wrong. He hesitated, then squared his shoulders. Millie, I've grown to admire you greatly over these past weeks. Millie's heart quickened. Flynn, please let me finish, he said quietly. I know you came to Sweetwater for a fresh start after losing your husband. I respect that, and I've tried to be patient, but my feelings for you have grown beyond friendship, and I'd like your permission to court you properly." Millie set down her papers, her hands trembling slightly. "You don't know everything about me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know enough," Flynn replied. "You're intelligent, kind, and stronger than you give yourself credit for. The rest we can learn together." Millie shook her head. "There are things in my past truths I haven't shared that might change your mind." Flynn took a step closer. "Then share them. Whatever burdens you carry, Millie, you don't have to bear them alone." The moment had come sooner than she'd prepared for, but Millie knew she couldn't delay any longer. She gestured to a student desk. "You might want to sit down." Flynn complied, looking concerned but resolute. Millie took a deep breath. "I'm not a widow," she began, the words hanging heavily in the air between them. "My husband is very much alive in Boston." Flynn's expression registered surprise, but he remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "We were married for 6 years, Millie went on, unable to meet his eyes. 6 years during which I failed to give him the one thing he wanted most, a child. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong, exactly. They just said some women are barren." The word still tasted bitter on her tongue. "Harold eventually tired of waiting. He divorced me, yes, divorced, which is scandal enough in Boston society, but to be divorced for barrenness." She swallowed hard. "They called me worthless. Even my own mother suggested I enter a convent, since I'd failed at the only thing women are truly valued for." When she finally looked up, expecting to see disgust or at least disappointment in Flynn's face, she was startled to find him watching her with unwavering compassion. "Is that all?" he asked gently. "All," Millie repeated, confused. "Isn't it enough? I lied to you, to everyone in Sweetwater, and I can't give you children. Most men want a family, heirs to carry on their name and work." Flynn rose from the desk and came to stand before her. "Millie, I don't care about the lie. I understand why you felt it necessary. As for children," he hesitated. "I've seen what childbirth can do. I lost my mother that way. If we never had children of our own, we'd still have each other, and there are children in need of homes." "You can't mean that," Millie whispered, hardly daring to hope. "I've never meant anything more," Flynn replied, taking her hands in his. "When I look at you, I don't see what you can't give me. I see everything I've been waiting for: a partner, a friend, a woman of courage and intelligence who makes me want to be a better man." Tears filled Millie's eyes. "Flynn, I'm not proposing marriage this minute," he clarified with a small smile. "I'm still asking permission to court you properly. But I wanted you to know that your past doesn't change my feelings. If anything, knowing what you've overcome makes me admire you even more." Millie felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the burden of secrecy she'd carried since arriving in Sweetwater. "Then yes," she said, her voice stronger. "You have my permission to court me, Flynn O'Malley." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the Texas horizon, warm, bright, and full of promise. "May I call on you Sunday after church? I'd like that," Millie replied, returning his smile through her tears. As Flynn left the schoolhouse, Millie remained at her desk, her mind whirling with emotions. For the first time since the devastating day when Harold had announced his intention to divorce her, Millie felt truly hopeful about her future. Flynn was true to his word. The following Sunday, he appeared at the general store after church services, hat in hand and wearing his best shirt. Beatrice, who had been informed of both Millie's truth and Flynn's courtship intentions, greeted him with warm approval. "I'll expect her home by supper," she told Flynn with a wink as Millie descended the stairs in a burgundy dress that complemented her brown hair and hazel eyes. "Yes, madam," Flynn replied solemnly, though his eyes never left Millie. They walked through town to a small park along the creek, where Flynn had prepared a picnic. As they ate cold chicken and fresh bread, they spoke of their pasts, their hopes, and their dreams. Flynn described his plans for expanding the double bar, while Millie shared her vision for developing the school. "I'd like to offer evening classes for adults," she explained. "Many of the ranch hands and miners can't read or do basic arithmetic. It puts them at a disadvantage in business dealings." "That's an excellent idea," Flynn agreed. "I'd support it, and I know several of my hands would attend." As autumn deepened into winter, Flynn's courtship continued with steady devotion. He visited Sweetwater at least twice a week, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, wildflower honey from the ranch's hives, or once, a delicate silver bracelet he'd commissioned from a silversmith in San Antonio. "It's too extravagant," Millie protested when he fastened it around her wrist. "Nothing's too good for you," Flynn replied simply. The town observed their courtship with general approval, though not without some gossip. Eleanor Blackwood, in particular, seemed determined to find fault. "A divorced woman," Millie overheard her saying to Mrs. Peterson outside the church. "And Barren, too. What can Flynn O'Malley be thinking?" But such voices were the minority. Most of Sweetwater had come to respect Millie for her work with the children, and Flynn's judgment was widely trusted. December brought Millie's first Texas Christmas, so different from the formal celebrations she'd known in Boston. The schoolhouse became the center of festivities, with a pageant performed by the children and a community dinner afterward. Flynn attended proudly, his gift to the school a new stove to replace the aging one, earning cheers from students and parents alike. "You're spoiling them," Millie told him as they stood near the Christmas tree the older boys had cut and decorated. "I'm investing in their future," Flynn corrected. "And in their teacher's comfort." On Christmas Eve, Flynn invited Millie to the ranch for dinner with his foreman's family. The house was decorated with evergreen boughs and red berries, and a tall pine tree stood in the parlor, adorned with paper ornaments made by the ranch children. After dinner, as the Parkers entertained the other guests with carols, Flynn led Millie to his study. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon. Millie unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small leather-bound journal. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the smooth cover. "Open it," Flynn urged. Inside, on the first page, he had written, "For Millie to record our story as it unfolds. With all my love, Flynn." "Our story?" Millie asked, looking up at him. Flynn took her hands in his. "Millie, these past months have been the happiest of my life. I know we agreed to a proper courtship, and perhaps it's too soon to speak of more, but I want you to know that my intentions are serious. When you're ready, if you'll have me, I want to make a life with you." Millie felt tears prick her eyes. "Flynn, are you certain? There are other women who could give you," he placed a gentle finger against her lips. "I don't want other women. I want you, Millie Evans, exactly as you are. You're everything I never knew I was waiting for." "Then yes," Millie whispered, her heart full to bursting. "When the time comes, my answer will be yes." Flynn's kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that made Millie's knees weak. When they finally parted, his blue eyes were dark with emotion. "Merry Christmas, Millie," he said softly. "Merry Christmas, Flynn," she replied, knowing this would be only the first of many they would share. Winter in Texas proved milder than the Massachusetts winters Millie was accustomed to. Though January brought several cold snaps that froze the creek and dusted Sweetwater with rare snow. School continued through the winter months, with attendance fluctuating according to weather and ranch work requirements. Flynn visited whenever roads allowed, sometimes staying overnight in town when conditions made the return journey to the ranch hazardous. On these occasions, he took a room at the small hotel, his propriety earning approval from even the most conservative townspeople. By February, their courtship was common knowledge throughout the county, and few were surprised when Flynn began making improvements to the ranch house, adding a larger bookcase to the study, and refurbishing the parlor with new curtains and upholstery. "He's preparing for a bride," Beatrice observed knowingly when Millie mentioned these changes. "Mark my words, he'll propose officially by spring." Millie blushed but didn't contradict her cousin. The understanding between her and Flynn had grown steadier with each passing month, and though they hadn't spoken explicitly of marriage since Christmas, both knew it was their destination. March brought the first wildflowers and longer days. Millie's students grew restless as spring fever set in, making discipline more challenging. One Friday afternoon, after a particularly trying day with the Callahan boys, Millie was erasing the blackboard when Flynn appeared at the schoolhouse door. "You look exhausted," he said sympathetically. Spring energy, Millie explained, setting down the eraser. The children can smell summer approaching and their minds are already running wild in the hills. Flynn smiled. Perfect timing then. I've come to invite you on an adventure. An adventure, Millie repeated skeptically. A ride to Simpson's Bluff, Flynn clarified. The wildflowers are spectacular this year and the view is worth the journey. We can take a picnic tomorrow if you're free. The idea of escaping town for a day appealed to Millie's own spring restlessness. That sounds wonderful, she agreed. The next morning dawned clear and mild, perfect for riding. Flynn arrived at the general store leading 2 horses, his own chestnut gelding and a gentle bay mare. "This is Daisy," he said, introducing Millie to the mare. "She's steady and sure-footed, good for a novice rider." "I've ridden before," Millie assured him, stroking Daisy's velvet nose, "though not often since coming to Texas." Flynn helped her mount, his hands lingering at her waist slightly longer than necessary. Once she was settled in the saddle, he swung easily onto Copper, and they set off north out of town. The ride to Simpson's Bluff took them through rolling hills carpeted with bluebonnets, Indian paintbrush, and golden coreopsis. Millie exclaimed with delight at the colorful display, so different from the cultivated gardens of Boston. "It's like riding through a painting," she said as they paused to let the horses drink at a small stream. "I've never seen such colors." "My mother used to say God shows off in Texas springtime," Flynn replied, his eyes warm as he watched Millie's enjoyment. "The bluff is just ahead. We'll leave the horses here and walk the rest of the way." They secured the horses in the shade and continued on foot, Flynn carrying the picnic basket Beatrice had prepared. The path steepened as they climbed, until finally they emerged onto a rocky promontory overlooking the surrounding countryside. "Oh," Millie gasped, taking in the panoramic view. Rolling hills stretched to the horizon, patches of woodland alternating with open grassland. The Double Bar Ranch was visible to the northwest, its buildings tiny with distance. "It's magnificent. Worth the climb?" Flynn asked, setting down the basket. "Absolutely," Millie assured him. They spread the blanket on a relatively flat section of rock and unpacked their lunch: cold chicken, bread, cheese, and apple tarts. As they ate, Flynn pointed out landmarks neighboring ranches, the winding course of the creek, and far to the east, a plume of smoke from the approaching railroad. "It'll reach Sweetwater by summer's end," he said. "Everything will change then, for better or worse?" Millie asked. Flynn considered the question. "Both, I suppose. The railroad will bring more settlers, more business. The town will grow, but something of the frontier spirit may be lost." "Progress is inevitable," Millie mused, "but perhaps we can preserve what matters most while embracing the benefits of change." "Such wisdom," Flynn said with a fond smile. "This is why I love you, Millie Evans. You see both the forest and the trees." It was the first time he'd spoken the word love so directly, and Millie felt her cheeks warm. "I love you too," she admitted, the words coming easily now that they'd been spoken. Flynn's expression grew serious. "I had a purpose in bringing you here today, beyond the wildflowers and the view." "Oh?" Millie asked, her heart quickening. Flynn reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He emptied the contents into his palm, a ring of delicately wrought gold set with a small but brilliant diamond. "It was my mother's." Millie's breath caught in her throat. "Millicent Evans," Flynn said, taking her hand. "When you came to Sweetwater, I never imagined you would become so essential to my happiness. You've brought light and learning not just to the children, but to everyone you touch, including me." He paused, his blue eyes earnest. "I know your past holds pain, and I know you fear you're somehow lacking, but when I look at you, I see everything I've ever wanted in a partner and a wife. Will you marry me, Millie? Will you build a life with me at the Double Bar?" Tears blurred Millie's vision. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Flynn, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Flynn pulled her into his arms, his kiss sealing their promise against the vast Texas sky. As they rode back to Sweetwater that afternoon, Millie felt a newfound peace. The ring on her finger represented not just Flynn's love, but a future she had once thought impossible, a life of purpose and connection, regardless of whether she ever bore children. They agreed to marry in June, after the school term ended. The announcement was met with delight from most of Sweetwater, with preparations beginning immediately. Beatrice insisted on hosting the wedding at the church, with a reception to follow in the town square. "It will be the event of the year," she declared. "My cousin marrying the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties." The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of teaching, planning, and visiting the ranch to discuss modifications to the house. Flynn insisted that Millie consider the double bar her home and encouraged her to suggest any changes that would make it more comfortable. The study could become a library, she ventured during one such visit, with shelves from floor to ceiling. "Consider it done," Flynn agreed readily. "And the small bedroom near the parlor, perhaps a sewing room for you." "Actually," Millie said hesitantly, "I thought it might make a good nursery someday, if we were to adopt, I mean." Flynn's expression softened. "I'd like that," he said, taking her hand. "Very much." May brought the end of the school term and a flurry of wedding preparations. Millie ordered a dress from San Antonio, cream-colored silk with lace trim, more elaborate than anything she'd worn since leaving Boston. Flynn, meanwhile, commissioned a new suit and arranged for improvements to the trail between the ranch and town, ensuring it would be passable even if summer rains came early. As the wedding day approached, Millie received an unexpected letter. It bore a Boston postmark and her mother's handwriting. "She's written to forbid the marriage," Millie said bitterly as she showed the unopened envelope to Beatrice. "She'll say it's inappropriate for a divorced woman to remarry so quickly, or that Flynn deserves better." "You don't know that," Beatrice said gently. "Read it, Millie." "Whatever she says, it can't hurt you anymore." With trembling fingers, Millie broke the seal and unfolded the letter. As she read, her expression changed from apprehension to surprise. "She's coming," Millie said, looking up. "To the wedding. She writes that she's reflected on her harsh judgments and wishes to make amends." She shook her head in disbelief. "I never thought she'd admit to being wrong." "People can surprise you," Beatrice said. "Will you welcome her?" Millie considered the question. "Yes," she decided. "The past is past. I'm building a new life with Flynn, and if she truly wishes to be part of it, I won't turn her away." Mrs. Evans arrived in Sweetwater a week before the wedding, a prim figure in traveling clothes that marked her immediately as an Easterner. Her reunion with Millie was initially stiff, but as the days passed, a tentative warmth developed between them. "Your Mr. O'Malley is quite impressive," Mrs. Evans admitted after meeting Flynn. "Not what I expected of a Texas rancher." "He's full of surprises," Millie agreed, pleased by her mother's approval despite herself. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, as if nature itself blessed the union. The church was decorated with wildflowers and ribbon, every pew filled with townsfolk and ranchers alike. Millie waited in the small anteroom, her cream silk dress rustling as she paced nervously. "You look beautiful," her mother said, adjusting Millie's veil. "Harold was a fool to let you go." "Mother," Millie exclaimed, surprised by the blunt statement. Mrs. Evans shrugged slightly. "It's the truth. I was wrong to side with him, wrong to suggest your worth lay in childbearing. I see that now, watching you here. You've built a life of meaning and found a man who values you for yourself. I'm proud of you, Millicent." Tears threatened to ruin Millie's carefully applied rouge. "Thank you, Mother." The music began. Louise Wheeler at the organ, playing the traditional wedding march. Beatrice appeared at the door. "It's time," she said softly, with her mother on one arm and Beatrice on the other. Millie walked down the aisle toward Flynn, who stood tall and handsome beside Reverend Parker. His face as he watched her approach was a study in joy and reverence. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Parker began as Millie joined Flynn at the altar, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. When Flynn spoke his vows, his voice was clear and unwavering. "I, Flynn O'Malley, take you, Millicent Evans, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Millie's voice trembled slightly as she repeated her own vows, but her conviction was absolute. This was right. This was where she belonged. By the power vested in me, Reverend Parker concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Flynn's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, and when they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. O'Malley, the church erupted in cheers. The celebration that followed was unlike any wedding reception Millie had attended in Boston. Tables loaded with food lined the town square, fiddle music encouraged dancing, and toasts were offered with everything from fine champagne, imported specially by Mr. Blackwood, in a gesture of goodwill, to home-brewed beer. As the sun began to set, Flynn found Millie sitting with her mother watching the dancing. It's time we were heading home, he said, offering his hand. The ranch is waiting for its new mistress. They departed amid a shower of rice and well wishes, climbing into the buggy Flynn had prepared for the journey. As they left Sweetwater behind, Millie leaned against her husband's shoulder, content in a way she had never imagined possible 2 years earlier when she'd arrived in Texas, heartbroken and uncertain. Happy, Mrs. O'Malley? Flynn asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Happier than I ever thought I could be, Millie replied honestly. Thank you for seeing value in me when others didn't. Flynn's arm tightened around her. You were never worthless, Millie, never barren in the ways that truly matter. Your heart, your mind, your spirit, they're more fertile than any field I've ever planted. As they reached the crest of a hill, the double bar came into view, lanterns glowing in welcome. Home, Millie thought. Their home, where together they would build a life rich with purpose, love, and perhaps someday, children who needed the kind of care and guidance they were prepared to give. 5 years later, Millie stood on the porch of the double bar, watching as Flynn led a small pony around the yard, his strong hands steadying 4-year-old Sarah as she giggled in delight. Behind them, 7-year-old Michael practiced rope tricks under the watchful eye of Hank Parker, now the ranch's head foreman. The children had come to them 2 years apart, first Michael, whose parents had died of fever while traveling west, then Sarah, abandoned at the church door with nothing but a note asking that she be given a good home. The town had turned naturally to the O'Malleys, whose desire to adopt was well known. Mama, look, Sarah called, her dark curls bouncing as the pony trotted gently around the yard. I'm riding all by myself, I see, sweetheart, Millie called back, her heart full. You're doing wonderfully. Flynn looked up at her, his smile as warm as it had been on their wedding day. Time had added a few lines around his eyes and silver threads at his temples, but his love remained as steady as the Texas hills. The double bar had prospered under their joint stewardship. Flynn's cattle operation had expanded, while Millie had introduced new crops to the garden and established a small orchard. She still taught at the Sweetwater school 3 days a week, having trained an assistant teacher to handle the other days. Their home had grown too, with additions to accommodate the children and the library Flynn had promised Millie before their marriage, now filled with books, and used not only by their family, but by ranch hands eager to improve their reading. The railroad had indeed reached Sweetwater, bringing growth and change. Yet the essence of their life remained hard work, honesty, and deep connection to the land and each other. As the children's riding lesson concluded, Flynn lifted Sarah from the pony and sent both children to wash up for dinner. He climbed the porch steps and pulled Millie into an embrace. What has you looking so thoughtful, wife? He asked, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Millie smiled up at him. I was just thinking about the day we met, how lost I felt, how certain I was that my life had ended before it truly began. And now, Flynn prompted. Now I know it was only beginning, Millie replied, leaning into his strength. They called me barren and worthless, but you saw something else. I saw everything, Flynn said simply. Everything I'd been waiting for. As the Texas sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson, Millie reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment, from the bitter disappointment of her first marriage to the rich fulfillment of life with Flynn and their children. Her arms were no longer empty, her heart no longer hollow. Here on this frontier that had once seemed so alien, she had found not just a home, but her true self valued not for what she could or couldn't give, but for who she was. And that, Millie knew, was worth everything.